Yee. And I'm the host of Way Up with Angela Yee, a nationally syndicated show on iHeartRadio. I'm from Brooklyn, so this is very exciting for me to be here. Thank you, Wes. Thank you to BRIC for this being just an amazing space. To have something like this today, there are a couple of house rules. There's a sign right here that will be held up. So everybody has, for these first two questions, 60 seconds to answer. So we just ask everybody be respectful, because everybody has to have a chance to talk. And then there'll be community members asking questions, and you'll have 90 seconds at that point to talk. So pay attention to the sign, don't ignore it. All right, and we all ask everybody, again, this is being televised on BRIC TV, and it must stay within schedule. So we'll get started with an opening statement, and we'll start on this end with Michael Blake. You have 60 seconds, and we'll pass it down.
What's going on, everybody? I said, what's going on, everybody? My name is Michael Blake, born and raised in the Bronx, New York. Show me love, Brooklyn. I'm still out here right now. We pay too much. We got to change the game. You want to change the game, we got to change our mayor. And we can do this in very specific ways. We can use arts for good. We can have universal child care. We can have guaranteed income. We can actually have affordable housing that is focused on the arts, as we used to do. We should have a Mitchell-Lama 2.0. We can change the game so that our kids can have civics, financial literacy, and mental health all at the same time. We can do this differently by embracing what's happening within our art communities. And if we do this, we can actually give people a better chance. And so at the end of the day, if you believe that we need something different, something that's more creative, and as the only person who has experience in the DC State House and in the city, my name is Michael Blake, and I'm asking the chance to be your mayor. And now, let's be very clear about this. I came with the best sneakers out here. I came with the hip-hop game right now, so we understand. But if you believe in what we're doing, go to BlakeFanNYC.com. Let's go, everybody.
Okay, thank you, Senator Zellner. Myrie?
So I'm going to break script a little bit here because art is about telling the truth. Just 10 minutes ago, we found out that the Department of Justice is telling the Southern District of New York to drop the charges against Mayor Adams. This should outrage every single New Yorker. What was this mayor willing to give up? Which New Yorkers was he willing to sell to get these charges dropped? Our libraries have been cut. Our parks have been cut. Our cultural institutions have been cut. ICE is allowed in our schools. ICE is allowed in our hospitals. And instead of having a mayor standing up for our communities, he's played for a pardon and has gotten exactly what he campaigned for. It is a disgrace, and we must do better. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Jessica Ramos is joining us via Zoom.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. I am Jessica Ramos, State Senator representing Queens, the district where I'm born, raised, and raising two amazing boys, one of which plays the drums and the other one who plays trumpet. So tonight's forum is very special to me because I know as a born and bred New Yorker how critical the arts are to our identity, no matter where you come from. And that's a beautiful thing, but we can do a better job of supporting our artists in this trying time. We have a convicted felon as president. We have a still indicted, incompetent man as our mayor. And these trying times require experienced leadership. I bring with me 20 years of public service, serving in the city council as staff during the Bloomberg administration, having been a member of the de Blasio administration, and now serving as senator during the Adams administration. I want to be able to fight for our affordable housing, including workforce housing for our artists. I've been championing childcare, universal childcare throughout my entire career and have already won significant expansions in subsidies. And I'm looking to make sure that we feel safe by really weaving mental health services into every aspect of our lives. And you can check out my plan called Harmony NYC on my website so that we can have the psychiatric beds and the services that we need in order to keep everyone safe, even those struggling with mental illness. I'm also looking towards the future and know how critical it is to have green jobs and to help our youth guarantee there are youth employment opportunities in order to better find themselves, find their careers and their vocation, and really experience everything that our beautiful and amazingly vibrant city has to offer. So I'm looking forward to the discussion tonight, and I especially hope to earn your vote. Thank you.
Okay. Before we continue, Wes is going to come back up to give his opening remarks as we were doing at the beginning of the show. Thank you, Wes. It's live, guys.
It's live. Do it live. We'll do it live. We got to get this part on camera, everybody. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to BRIC House. My name is Wes Jackson. Thank you. What a great crowd. I have the honor and privilege of serving as the president of BRIC Arts Media, and on behalf of the staff, the board, and volunteers, we welcome you into our home. This evening, we're having a very special forum. The importance of arts and culture in New York City is undeniable. Brooklyn's cultural impact on the world is also undeniable. The benefits from across the culture and art are proven to enhance the quality of life, contributing millions of dollars to the economy and providing opportunities for employment and expression. As a cultural hub that uplifts storytellers, media makers, content creators, and artists, BRIC is honored to present this evening's vital conversation in partnership with New York for Culture and Arts and the Culture and Arts Policy Institute and over 20 cultural organizations from across the city. I want to thank our current administration and current commissioner, Lori Cumbo, specifically, who has been a champion for the arts and culture for decades and whose contributions are immeasurable. Tonight, our community has the timely opportunity to engage with the participating mayoral candidates and learn about their vision for the arts and culture sector. I want to also retroactively introduce our wonderful moderator, who is already gone, Ms. Angela Yee. Give it up for Yee. A New York City media icon and community advocate. She's one of media's best-known multi-hyphenates, an award-winning media personality that co-hosted the popular, nationally syndicated radio show, The Breakfast Club. Yeah, you know what it is. She now hosts her own lip service podcast and her own nationally syndicated radio show, Way Up with Angela Yee. She owns several businesses, many here right in Brooklyn, Bed-Stuy, right by the Y, we shout out Cup, including the coffee shop Cup, and provided our refreshments tonight. So when you're out there, thank Angela Yee for all of that. She's a philanthropist and community leader, and we are so grateful to see her tonight. Please join me in welcoming our moderator, Miss Angela Yee.
Thank you. Well, that was amazing. But of course, this is not about me at all tonight. It's about us, right? So let's continue with the 60-second introductions. Comptroller Brad Lander is here now. If you want to give your 60-second opening statement, and there's a time sheet right here, so you know not to go over.
All right. Good evening. So many of the things I love best about New York City are its extraordinary arts and culture. First Saturdays at the Brooklyn Museum, BRIC Celebrate Brooklyn, Shakespeare in the Park, the musicians who play in the Endale Arch in Prospect Park, restored to grandeur by participatory budgeting. Heck, my daughter's bat mitzvah party was right here at BRIC House. And beyond our personal favorites, the arts are a defining economic sector for New York City, as my office showed in a recent report and dashboard. But for the arts to thrive in the future, we need affordable places for artists to live and work, like I led in Gowanus. We need safe and thriving public spaces. We need arts organizations in all our schools and neighborhoods. And for all of that, we need better leadership at City Hall, my goodness. I bring a proven track record of making government work better and a mix of bold but practical ideas that'll deliver for artists, for arts organizations, and for all New Yorkers. Grateful for the opportunity to talk with you tonight.
Okay, thank you, Comptroller Brad Lander. Next up, Scott Stringer.
Well, thank you for having me, and it's great to be in front of you tonight. Look, for me, the arts has literally been something very close to home. My wife, who's here tonight, Elise Bucksbaum, has been a long advocate, activist for the arts, in the arts. And believe me, what she said to me tonight is, if you mess up, don't come home. So she came herself. But look, let's cut right to the chase. The arts is big business. $185 billion to the city economy. That's big. 185,000 people employed. That's big. But what we have to recognize is arts and culture is about the 5 boroughs. It's not just about Museum Mile. It's about the struggling artists, the artists who came to this country, who flee persecution. I've audited, I've analyzed, I've done the work that makes me qualified to be the mayor that will reimagine what arts and culture and what the Department of Cultural Affairs can be. And that's why I'm running, that's why I'm here tonight, and I'm ready for your questions. Is that okay, Elise?
Thank you. All right, and Whitney Tilson.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Whitney Tilson. Let me summarize my campaign. If you love the city and you think it's headed in the wrong direction and want new leadership, I am the only change candidate in the Democratic primary. I'm the only one who's not a career politician and who has a business background. I am a lifelong hardcore Democrat, but I feel, and I think New Yorkers agree, that our party is failing us. The city government has made it almost impossible to build new housing, and so rents are out of control. Crime is up 52%, the major felonies in the last 5 years. People don't feel safe, and families with children are not happy with public school system in which we're spending $43,000 a kid and half the kids can't read at even a basic level. So if you think things are great and you want another career politician running this city, I am not your man. If you are fed up and want real change, I am the only change candidate. When I'm elected, I will not owe anything to anyone. I will be fighting solely for the people of New York. I pledge to end street homelessness, cut crime in half, double the rate of construction of affordable housing, and make New York City the best city in the world for small businesses. So I hope you'll join me in the fight for greater prosperity, affordability, and safety for every New Yorker, because New York deserves better. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we are hearing directly from these candidates tonight, so you have 60 seconds for this question. So first question, artists and cultural workers contribute to the city's economy and the social well-being of New Yorkers, making New York City a vibrant cultural capital. Still, they do face significant challenges in securing affordable housing and working space. From new development to adaptive reuse, what is your approach to increasing access to affordable living and workspace for artists and workers in the creative industries in New York City? And we'll start with you, Michael Blake.
Not only do we have to have adaptive reuse, we have to think about a reimagining around Mitchell-Lama 2.0 so that you have dedicated housing that is built for the artist community. We used to have that. When we had, Timothy Chalamet was doing this recently, talking about how do we build out for those that are in the spaces. We're not doing that right now. And at the end of the day, it is too expensive for someone to have a home in New York City, and we're actually not making it easier. Going a step further around affordable housing, it's also about how do we make sure that you get more funding for your communities and your work right now. We should actually have grants going to the artist community and have nonprofit reimbursement go faster, because too often we're asking you to have a livelihood in your communities, but you're being asked to wait too long. It makes no sense that you're waiting a year or longer to get paid to provide community support in your network. We think about that in the Bronx. We have the Hip Hop Museum that we're building out right now. It would make no sense that you would have affordable housing there, but then those that are providing the cultural dynamic to the community can't live in those communities. And so we do that also by having a focus around housing as well. We should have guaranteed income and also a local medium income approach, because AMI is not working for the artist community. If we do all of that, we'll do it better for you to have a place to be here.
Okay, thank you. Comptroller Brad Lander.
How many artists in this room would like a studio for $300 a month? 100 of them are opening in Gowanus in the coming months because of the work we did together to make that rezoning keep Gowanus creative. So long before I got into public office, I spent 15 years working in affordable housing and community development, building and preserving affordable homes in Brooklyn. And we were always thinking, where will the artists and small businesses go? So when we got to the Gowanus rezoning and people said, yeah, we want 8,000 new units of housing, we want 3,000 of them deeply affordable, but there's gotta be affordable space for artists. And so we built a whole new zoning model called the Gowanus Mix, only place it's been done, basically a floor of each of those buildings, a zoning bonus, only for arts, artisans, light manufacturing, and nonprofit use. If we did that across the city, we'd have thousands of affordable artist space. We should also do things like our friend Esther Robinson did at Brooklyn Army Terminal. Yeah, let's hear it for that, which is creating long-term affordable space for artists. If we use city-owned spaces, if we use zoning bonuses, if we invest, we can keep the arts affordable, both as spaces to live and to work.
Okay, thank you, Comptroller Brad Lander. Senator Zellner Myrie.
Thank you. So I grew up in a rent-stabilized apartment right here in Brooklyn. My story would not be possible if not for that rent regulation and that affordability. We have to ensure that we use every tool at our disposal to preserve the already affordable housing. We have a great right to counsel program, but it's not fully funded and it's not fully resourced. I'd like to fully fund right to counsel and expand it as well. I think it's important for us to build more housing and housing of all types. That is how we will bring down the rent and the cost for everyone and make this a city where even if you are an artist, that you can live here, you can afford to be here. I think we got to be honest about that conversation and what it's going to take, and that's why we have a plan and a mandate for 1 million homes over the next 10 years.
Thank you. And watching over, Senator Jessica Ramos, 60 seconds.
It's big sister today, not big brother. Hi, everyone. Actually, this past weekend, I had the opportunity to take my children to LaGuardia High School to see the Rising Stars Showcase. And it's been incredible to see how talented our young people are. And as they grow in their art and, well, in their bodies, we, of course, want them to be able to keep making New York their home. So I am proposing a bill that I've been carrying in the Senate that I would be able to do outright as your mayor, which is the Jobs and Housing Act that would leverage our taxpayer dollars and union pension dollars to build affordable housing union. This is really important, of course, in making sure that there are good jobs created all around and that construction is done safely. But it's really about bringing back the way we used to build not only low-income housing, but also modest equity homeownership opportunities. I think many times when we're talking about low-income housing and affordable housing, we lose out on thinking about how New Yorkers really want to be able to own a piece of this city.
Thank you, Senator Jessica Ramos. Thank you very much. Next up, Scott Stringer.
Look, we've seen this story time and time again play out. Artists move into an industrial community where it's not residential, set up shop, does what they're supposed to do, which is be creative and exciting and vibrant. And within a couple of years, the real estate speculators come in and push the artists out. So the artists move from community to community and the cycle continues. I think we have to change the paradigm here. And what I propose is something very simple. We've got 1,000 lots in this city that the city owns. We own it, you own it. Why are we giving these lots away to the speculators when we can build, as Michael says, build Mitchell-Lama 2.0? You see, if we have the land is free and it's our land, let's go to the not-for-profits. Let's go to the arts community. Let's go build the tens of thousands of affordable housing units that have always steered New York. Now, it's going to take someone with some experience who's done this work. I financed affordable housing, $1 billion as controller. I understand what LaGuardia did with public housing and Lindsay did with Mitchell-Lama. We got to get to work doing this because the cycle will not stop until we take a time out and say, can we actually create the tens of thousands of units? I think we can.
Okay, thank you, Scott Stringer. Whitney Tilson.
Yeah. If you all want to know why your rent is so high, it's very simple, supply and demand. A lot of people want to live in this city, and we've made it almost impossible to build new housing. I hear what the politicians say, and they all talk about new housing and all, but it doesn't happen. And I will give you an example of why. I spoke with a developer yesterday, been a family business, been in the city for 50, 60 years. They have a parcel in Far Rockaway. They spent $2 million in 2 years on a project that would have built a couple towers, over 1,000 units. And they told me what everyone in the real estate business tells me trying to do business in New York, and they've by and large given up, that it's a combination of hostility, quote, they treat us like the enemy, and incompetence. And so This project, they said they went through multiple people at the Department of Housing Preservation and Development. They were all recent college grads, and they wouldn't even meet with the developers who wanted to pour tens of millions of dollars into building middle-class housing in New York. And they would only do Zoom calls, kids right out of college. That's the kind of incompetence we've got in the city. And so what did they do? They instead went down to Arlington, Virginia, built a beautiful new development, and they said Arlington rolled out the welcome mat. It was totally different from New York. We need a complete paradigm shift in terms of how we work with the private sector to build new housing in the city.
Okay, thank you, Whitney Tilson. And welcome to Assembly Member Zohran Mamdani. Thank you. The question that we're talking about right now is we're talking about increasing access to affordable living and workspace for artists and workers in the creative industries in New York City. There's a lot of challenges in securing affordable housing and working space. And if you want to give a brief intro as well.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I thank you so much for having me. I apologize for being late. I want to thank Amtrak and the A train for getting me here from Albany. I think art, in many ways, at its core, is an act of dreaming. And you cannot afford to dream if you cannot afford your rent, if you cannot afford your childcare, your groceries, your Metro card. And when we think about how do we make this a city where artists could not just survive, but thrive and prosper, it is one where we have to ensure that artists can actually afford where they live. And when I think about two leading artists today, Coleman Domingo and Timothy Chalamet, we can't separate their stories from that of Mitchell Lama, from them living in housing that they could actually afford. And I'm so excited that we've put forward a plan to build 200,000 union-built, permanently affordable, rent-stabilized homes to be built across the next 10 years, tripling what the city is set to build, and having it be for families who cannot afford what's on the market right now. We're talking about a family of four that makes $72,000, a low-income senior, someone who's stuck in a shelter. These are all people who could be artists, and we need to give them housing so that they can get back to art.
Okay, thank you, Assembly Member Mamdani. The next question, 60 seconds to answer this as well. Across the U.S., many cities have declared themselves sanctuary cities, implementing policies to protect immigrant communities and recognize their contributions to the social and economic well-being of the places they call home. With 40% of New York City's population being foreign-born and 37% of its artists identifying as immigrants, how do you view the role of sanctuary policies in New York City? And would you expand these protections? And if so, what specific policies would you implement? This is recorded, remember, so we can always refer back to this, okay, if necessary. 60 seconds. Michael Blake.
Well, as the son of Jamaican immigrants, let's be clear, I'm actually going to be a mayor that looks after immigrants, as unlike Vice President Eric Adams right now, who only cares about Donald Trump, right? And so let's be clear. We shouldn't have ICE in our schools. We shouldn't have ICE at our nonprofits. I'm also a reverend. There's no way on earth we should have ICE at a place of worship. It's absolutely unacceptable, and it's unconstitutional when you talk about birthright citizenship. And so what do we need to do? First and foremost, you need humanity in your mayor. And you have a mayor that does not give a damn about immigrants right now. We got to be clear about that. Second, the mayor is also trying to divide us and making it seem like this is a conversation just around the Latino community. Latino, African, Caribbean, all of us should be aligned around this. Next step, partner up with our legal entities, not just our incredible AG, shout out to Tish James all day, every day, but to the DAs as well, because we have to have the legal protections as well. Lastly, we have to have a greater access when it comes to language access. We are having communities right now that are afraid of what is happening. Practically, you have school attendance rates going down because people are wondering if they can go to school. You have street vendors that are being hurt. You actually have to have the legal protections and the policy protections. And as the only person who has worked in the White House, the state, and locally, I'm best prepared to make sure our immigrants are actually protected against Donald Trump.
Okay, thank you, Michael Blake. Comptroller Brad Lander.
This morning, 2 meetings took place in the municipal building. On one side, our mayor was busy telling his deputy mayors and commissioners they're not allowed to speak out against Donald Trump, even when he's taking the money that their agencies need to educate our kids or run their hospitals, any of it. On the other side of the municipal building, I convened a meeting with Attorney General Tish James, Speaker Adrian Adams, Public Advocate Jumaane Williams, and business leaders with immigrant leaders and community leaders to say, what can we do to fight for the people of this city. We came up with a bunch of ideas, expanded legal services, not just for immigrants, but for the small businesses that are fearing raids. When I am mayor, it won't just be an option for city employees to fight for New Yorkers. It will be the expectation. That's why we audited the 30 and 60-day rules and showed how you could have a refugee resettlement model right here in New York City that helps folks get good jobs and move out of shelter. Let's be clear about this. The reason this is the most inclusive, creative, cultural city there has ever been is because it's the best immigrant city in the history of planet Earth, and we're gonna fight like hell to keep it that way.
Thank you, Comptroller. Senator Murray.
I'm not gonna wait until I become mayor. Last week, we stood outside of Kings County Hospital and demanded that this mayor rescind the guidance that he issued. A welcome invitation to ICE to come threaten city workers, to come threaten our healthcare professionals. I'm also a lawyer. I'm familiar with the Constitution. I've taken many oaths to uphold the Constitution as a state senator and as a member of the New York Bar. What he is doing is flat out unconstitutional. And he did it so that he can get the result that we saw tonight, for the DOJ to drop the charges. My parents were not citizens when they came to this country. I had asthma when I was young. I had asthma attacks. They took me to Kings County Hospital. If they were here today in this setting, I could die because they were afraid to go to the hospital. This mayor should be ashamed of himself. And we cannot stand by. We must stand up right now.
All right. Thank you, Senator Murray. Senator Jessica Ramos.
You know, I was at City Hall during the first Trump administration, and one of the first things we did in order to protect our immigrants was to create a program that connected them to legal services. It was a quick hotline for our immigrant neighbors to call and be connected. And it made sense because we are a town with 8 law schools and countless lawyers who are available to help when people in need. And unfortunately, we've lost a lot of time during this administration. We could have been helping these asylum seekers start applying in order to adjust their status. And it's been a disgrace, especially as the daughter of formerly undocumented Colombian immigrants. My mom crossed the Mexican border just like many immigrants are doing today. I empathize, and I want to make sure all of our children are safe and our immigrants are safe in every corner of our city. We need to keep ICE out of New York City.
Thank you, Senator Ramos. Scott Stringer, sanctuary policies in New York City.
Eric Adams lost me the night he walked into a public school with a lot of cops and pronounced the migrant assimilation to New York a complete success. That, for him, it meant that young children with single parents with one blanket were sleeping on a gymnasium. And I remember watching this on New York One thinking, how can this be the success story of New York when you think about the fact that those kids sleeping on the floor, there's a Pulitzer Prize winner there, there's an award-winning artist that's gonna grow up there, there's a future mayor there. And this guy has done everything he can pre-Trump to destroy that New York City dream. As mayor, we're gonna do things that we do well at. We're gonna make sure that just like for artists who flee persecution many times because of their art, we're gonna create safe havens. We're gonna have a zero tolerance of ICE intervention in the schools. My kids are public school kids, they're in middle school. Their friends are not coming to school because their parents are afraid. Imagine a world we're living in real time. Now, everyone will promise, but I ask you to look at a lifetime record of fighting and standing up for the people who are most vulnerable in the city. That's the decision you have to make, but we all agree that what's happening right now is a national and international disgrace on the greatest city in the world. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Scott Stringer. Whitney Tilson.
I love immigrants. I'm the descendant of immigrants, and I believe in the New York Sanctuary City Law dating back to 1989. I would have no interest as mayor in cooperating with the Trump administration's immoral and economically calamitous attempt to deport 12 million people who are almost all entirely law-abiding and hardworking. However, my first job as mayor of New York City is to protect the people of New York, and to the extent anyone is in this country who is a member of a gang or committing serious crimes, I think the city should absolutely cooperate in cooperating with the feds in that area. In particular, I think the City Council made a mistake in 2014 passing legislation that closed the ICE office at Rikers Island. I think what that led to is you all probably read about the Venezuelan migrant gang member who terrorized one of Alvin Bragg's ADAs, sexually assaulted her, and it turns out it was his 7th arrest last year. He should have been deported, turned over to ICE and deported on the 1st arrest.
Okay, thank you, Whitney Tilson. Assemblymember Zohran Mamdani.
If elected, I would be the first immigrant mayor of this city in generations. But I don't believe that representation in and of itself is enough. What we need is a commitment to not only uphold existing sanctuary city policies, but to strengthen them and to ensure that compliance is understood as not just refusing ICE entry from New York City public schools, hospitals, city property, but also the full extent of the law, which extends to properties of city contractors. I would set up an oversight commission to ensure full compliance, and I would ensure also that the city finally provides legal representation to each and every immigrant that's in need. Because what we know is that if you provide that kind of a lawyer, you can see the success rates go from 4% 11-fold higher. And that is the difference between a New Yorker being ripped from their home and the fabric of our city being torn apart and us being able to keep the city that we love and call home.
All right, thank you for that. A lot of information here, and now we are going to have 90 seconds for each of these questions from community members, starting with Connie Lynn, Youth Program Coordinator for Glow Community Center.
It's a little tall, but... Hi, my name is Connie Lynn, and I am the Youth Program Coordinator at Glow Community Center. I'm also a senior at LaGuardia High School. Shout out to LaGuardia. Research shows that access to the arts and sciences is integral in a student's growth, both in and out the classroom, boosting academic outcomes, improving engagement, and fostering better mental and developmental health, and providing key skills for entry into the 21st century workforce, including the creative and STEM industries. Yet, less than 1/3 of NYC middle school students meet learning requirements in the arts, and instrumental hours both in the arts and sciences vary significantly at the elementary school level. As mayor, how would you address these gaps to ensure that students have equal access to a well-ended education that prepares them for the future?
Okay. Michael Blake, we'll start with you. 90 seconds.
First, I need your headphones, because your headphone game is strong right there. I went to PS 79. PS 79 was the book that Jonathan Kozol wrote about in Savage Inequality, Children in America's Schools. So we'll start from the space that we are not honoring arts in our education from the beginning. And not just for the students, we're also not making sure that our teachers and those are part of the entire ecosystem being supported as well. You're having to spend money out of your own pocket, so we're not actually developing what's happening within art. And so what do we need to do? First and foremost, we actually have to have a cradle-to-career approach. I was the one who led the My Brother's Keeper program. We're the only state in the country that has that right now. And fundamentally, one of the things we did is that you can use art for good. You can transform the experience of a child, not just from the visual art, but also from spoken word as well. You know, just down the block, if you're at BAM, you know, you think about that. You can show what can be possible within that. Second, we actually have to make it easier so that you can realize your dreams when it comes to art as a student. And that's not just from an elementary school perspective in middle school, but also through high school. And that's one of the reasons why I do believe that we should make sure that every student that graduates from New York City High School, if they so choose, can go to CUNY for free. We used to have that back in the day. If you do that, you create a space immediately where people can realize their dreams. Going back to the earlier question, Angela, if we do this here, you also make it easier for someone to say, you know what, I go to school, I graduate from school, but then I can actually have a home here at the same time. And if you are going and doing these things, but you don't feel that you can realize your dreams because you can't afford it, you're not making it easier. That's why we have to have more funding for cultural institutional groups, as well as our cultural development fund. If we do both of those at the same time, our students can realize their dreams, the teachers can have that support, and we have broader support for the collective educational ecosystem so you can realize those dreams as well.
Okay, thank you. Comptroller Brad Lander.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Hani. Many of us up here support universally accessible after school as envisioned by New Yorkers United for Childcare. I'll give Zelnor his props. I think he was the first of us to say it, but pretty much we all support it at this point. Sometimes you think about that just as like the childcare that parents need, but it's such an opportunity to think about the school day with some expanded time. And it's in that after school that we've got to think about, okay, here's this unbelievable set of time to really enrich arts and culture education in the schools and make that something every single school has resources for, teachers for. A lot of those can be artists from the community who get paid to come in, and organizations you go out and do field trips to, and the resources to provide it. Right now, so much of our arts education is funded by like the PTA, but of course that's deeply inequitable. Now that was why I was proud to lead the effort to integrate the middle schools of District 15, a big battle to make sure that we really have equal education across our schools. That means you gotta provide the funding directly and not like hope it comes from somewhere else. And there's also some really cool models like the Brooklyn STEAM Center, which is in the Navy Yard. That's a high school that serves 8 other high schools, and you can rotate through it. And they've got a whole performing arts program where you can learn to be a stage manager, where you can learn, really focus on arts as a career. We can provide that to every single New York City school kid.
Okay, thank you. Senator Murray.
Thank you. Okay, so the sound people may be upset with what I'm about to do, but just stay with me for a second. All right, so I wasn't really good at playing instruments. I played the clarinet for a short amount of time in middle school. I was terrible. I played the saxophone for about a day and was terrible. I was in karate. I was terrible. But there was one thing that I could do, so I'm going to try to break it out in enough time that we have here. All right, so don't tell me, sound people, if this is messing up the mics. So this was the one thing that I could do. I could do this. That's all I got. I was on the step team. I was the only boy on the step team. But it gave me confidence. It is the thing where my mom could have a peace of mind because she didn't get off at 2:30 p.m. to come pick me up. Had me in after school, learning to step, being in a safe environment, encouraging the arts. That is why I want universal after school for every single family, every single student that wants it. It is not just about empowering the individual, but this is what's going to keep us safe. Giving our students the arts, giving them an opportunity to express themselves, giving them the confidence that comes from being an artist. That's what I want to provide for everybody.
All right, thank you. We need to see that footage. Senator Jessica Ramos, we'll throw it to you.
Well, let me start by saying that Adams's budget cuts this past year were really devastating to LaGuardia High School, and I was proud to lead a letter with the local senator, Brad Hoylman-Siegel, to make sure that we were fighting back and telling the administration to restore the funding and make sure that our high school children were able to access all of the arts clubs that they had been promised when they entered the school. I'm proud to see that some of that has already started to happen, and we've been working with the principal there to make sure it's true. What I'm proposing is to open high schools a little later, which is better for young people's developing brains, to make sure that then our high schools are open to are available to stay open until later. That's really important in order to keep our children off the streets. And that's why I want to make sure that the summer youth employment program actually is year-round, so that young people ages 16 to 24 are actually able to access some of the best opportunities available in the city, including in the arts. But I also include the arts as a means of therapy in my Harmony NYC mental health plan, because really art is all about making us feel good, helping us express our emotions. And that's something that we New Yorkers, after surviving the pandemic, and especially our youth, need to be able to feel once again. So I will be supporting that and not be playing any games in the budget.
Okay, thank you, Senator Ramos. Scott Stringer, can you step?
I am not going to embarrass my friend. But I'm from JFK High School in Washington Heights, and I can moonwalk.
Okay.
But that was cool. Okay. Thank you. The first audit that I did as controller back in 2013 was to figure out where the certified arts teachers were in the public school system. And we started to take a look, and no surprise, we found that in Brooklyn, in communities of color, and in the Bronx, there were no certified arts teachers. Hundreds missing. In other words, how can we talk about art and helping the kids and giving them what they need when there were no art teachers? De Blasio calls me up after the report comes out and says, is this true? And we were getting along then. So I run over to City Hall and we go, let's do something about it. And we started to work with the teachers and we started to hire the arts teachers, certified arts teachers. That sent a message that suddenly teaching art is a priority. We then went a step further. And we said, why don't we monitor this and make sure that we have art equity in the city? And it starts with the teachers. I believe very strongly now that this whole effort has collapsed. We don't talk about the arts teachers. In fact, do you know how many arts teachers we're down? Who knows this? We're down 425. 19% of the schools don't have arts teachers. And we have to change that. So here's what I'm going to do as mayor with our new chancellor. And with our new city hall that's going to have capacity to do big things again. We're going to hire the arts teachers. We're going to do what a lot of the candidates are talking about, which is a real child care program and an after-school program. Because let's face it, we also have to take care of the parents as well. And if they're doing two jobs and they can't pick up their kids, that's when the trouble starts. That was what's happening in my neighborhood growing up. The trouble didn't start at night. It started at 3 o'clock when no one was watching out for us. And that's why we need after school, and that's why we need arts education, and that's why my son has to do better in his next homework arts assignment, even though we're here tonight, because art is not easy. It's not a free period, right? It's real.
And Whitney Tilson?
Your question underscores the fact that there's lack of arts program in our schools. Sufficient arts programs and other enrichment programs underscores the broader failure of our school system. It is the single biggest failure of our city government. We're spending $40 billion out of our gargantuan $115 billion city budget, double that of any other city in the world. We're spending $43,000 a kid. And I can't figure out where all the money's going, because the average public school spending in America is $17,000. We're spending $43,000. How is it that we don't have great arts programs? But how is it, I mean, more fundamentally, that half of fourth graders by age 10 aren't even reading at a basic level? So how is this happening? It's systemic. It's a corrupt, bloated system that is beholden to special interests. And I can tell you the adults in the system in that $40 billion are super well organized, super politically powerful, and they basically own every Democratic politician in this city and in this state. So nothing really happens. The system is run for the benefit of the adults. So what is the only way to break out of this? And by the way, don't blame the kids and their parents. I was employee number 2 founding Teach for America 35 years ago, my first job out of college right here in this city. Been on the board of KIPP charter schools for 20 plus years. We at KIPP, we deliberately locate our schools in the lowest income neighborhoods with the worst failing public schools, where kids have only a 9% chance of graduating from college. In our schools, they have a 65% chance. You need an independent mayor who's independent of the system, who hires an independent chancellor who will fight for the kids in the system. That's what we need, and that's what I will deliver.
Thank you. Assemblymember Zaram Mamdani.
It seems like every day we find another law that Eric Adams doesn't feel like he has to follow. Because what we're talking about right now is New York City being in violation of state requirements. This is a requirement that every New York City public school student has a certified arts teacher within their school. And yet, as has been said, we're seeing estimates of 17 to 19% of those students not having that. And it's unconscionable. And what's so frustrating is that in Albany, I'm proud to have been part of the fight to deliver record funding for our New York City public schools. And then we come back and we find that this mayor has just used that money to move it around. And it feels for these students and these families as if there was no increase. Ultimately, what this comes down to is, are you willing to find the money to bridge this gap? And as the next mayor, I will be. I will do that in partnership with Albany, and I will also look at the history that we've had where we've put city funding to better use, because we know that arts are often the first thing on the chopping block. We know that we allow well-resourced PTAs to cover up the cracks of a system that is fundamentally disinvesting in arts education. If we want equal outcomes, we need equal investments. And if we truly believe that having the most segregated school system in America is the stain that it is, then we have to take this kind of action to ensure that every single New York City public school student not only has an arts period that they can go to, but sees arts as a possible way for them to live their entire life.
Thank you. All right, our next question is from Hasiba Haq, media maker and cultural organizer. She's short like me.
Yeah, petite. Thank you. Hi. So my name is Hasiba. I am born and raised in Brooklyn. I'm a creative storyteller, and I've been spending the last decade working in public spaces with artists and immigrant communities. So my question for you tonight, research from the Social Impact of the Arts Project at the University of Pennsylvania has demonstrated how arts and culture improve health, safety, and well-being in New York City's low-income neighborhoods. Arts and culture bring people together across differences in public spaces, such as plazas, parks, and libraries. How can we proactively support arts and culture to strengthen our communities and democracy in a time of growing polarization? Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Blake.
Well, first, with my black and gold Air Force Ones, I challenged Zelnor to a step off because he wouldn't, as a two-time alpha step champion, he wouldn't be ready for that right there. So let me just make sure we get, I'm just saying, he don't want to do it, he won't do it. But let me get back to the question at hand right now. We all understand, especially during the times of COVID, that being in outdoor spaces was what allowed people to have an opportunity to make it, and I saw that fundamentally in the Bronx. We see it out here, of course, in Brooklyn. We see it across the city. And so first and foremost, we actually have to fund what's happening in our public spaces, our public theaters, our opportunities for you to be engaged, as well as the nonprofits that are in these spaces as well, because over and over again, we're asking for you to change the game in your communities, but we're actually not funding and supporting you consistently with that. Separately, and second, we got to make sure that the infrastructure is actually better in a lot of these places right now. So actually have functioning and working microphones and lights and stages and all of those dynamics there. I see you out there, world's best dad. I see you right there. That's why you give me the whoop right there. If we do all of that, you actually create an environment that gives people a better chance over and over again. And we think about this, I've seen this, I'm on the board of Dream Yard in the Bronx, over and over again. Us being outside in these public spaces create an opportunity for everyone to realize their dreams. And so it's about having someone that actually cares about it and puts the funding towards it and then puts people in place to make it real every single day. I'm at Van Cortlandt Park all the time. We see that there, but it's only going to be successful if we actually support those of you that actually want to make this happen, and we can do that as mayor.
Thank you. And Comptroller Brad Lander.
Brings me great joy to get this question from you, Hasiba, given the work that we did together to create Avenue C Plaza and Kensington Plaza, where those things thrived. I joke Avenue C Plaza is the place more Bangladeshis have celebrated Day of the Dead than anywhere else on planet Earth. When you think about bringing people together across lines of difference, whether that was making kites or having the best feminist iftar on the planet, that's because there was a thing called the Neighborhood Plaza Partnership. And for a couple of years that we advocated for, it put money into the grassroots nonprofits that could fill up plaza spaces, whether that's Corona Plaza or Kensington Plaza or plazas in the Bronx. But the de Blasio administration let it die. It's never been brought back. And when I'm mayor, we definitely will bring it back, because you got to have the plaza space, and then you got to fund the arts groups and the neighbors to fill it up with all that incredible programming. Our arts institutions themselves can do more of that. I mean, what First Saturday is at Brooklyn Museum, or it happens all around the city, it's not just that it brings people in, you fund the neighborhood organizations and help people see what it looks like and bring people together across lines of difference, and we could do so much more of that. Imagine if our public pools in the summertime, instead of being like going through the airport security line to get in and like only be able to wear a white t-shirt on the pool deck, was a pool party with your food and your vendors and your neighborhood music. So pool party summer will be the first summer of the Lander administration and a damn good way of combating polarization.
Thank you. Senator Zellner Marie.
Thank you. Shout out to the infrared Air Max 90s. And I'm on that. Yeah. I went to high school right up the block. I went to Brooklyn Tech. And back when I was in high school, you didn't go to Fort Greene Park because it wasn't safe. Now it's a completely different story. And it has changed how the community interacts with the green space. I learned how to ride a bike in Prospect Park. I grew up 2 blocks away from it. Sometimes after school, I was at the Brooklyn Public Library on Flatbush Avenue. It's where my mom said, you have to be. These institutions aren't just nice to visit on the weekend. They are a lifeline. They're where people make their stories. I would not be who I am without them. I have the honor of representing a lot of those institutions right now in the state Senate. And we have to back up our talk with action. I've been very proud to put state allocations into institutions like BRIC. You know, back in the day when this was BCAT, y'all know what time it is, yeah, if he was real, right? I remember sometimes if your cable got cut off, you still had BCAT. You could still watch TV. If you couldn't afford to go to a festival, if you couldn't make your way to the city, you could still do what BRIC does every summer. You could still go to that and take advantage of it. For affordability purposes alone, these institutions are important for us to invest in. And lastly, they're good for our safety. When I represented Brownsville in the state Senate, we saw between 2 NYCHA developments, the design by young people of street art and streetscape and more lighting. And we saw people able to come together over that because it was a safe and neutral territory for people to engage. So it's important for our public safety as well.
Thank you. Senator Jessica Ramos, you have 90 seconds.
Well, I want to thank Hasiba for her question because it is precisely storytelling that can really humanize conflict and bring people together, hopefully for a lasting peace. That to me is real public safety. I see art as a mental health investment, as a workforce development investment, because I want to see a real renaissance for our city. As your mayor, I want to be able to support those in our communities who want to write plays about what's happening so that there are more public theater opportunities. I want to support our painters and graffiti artists to have beautiful murals decorating our neighborhoods and our streets. I want to hear beautiful music at our streets and at our plazas. I think this is really important as we start to climb out of the pandemic era in earnest and really actually have all of this art help us heal things that we've perhaps even shoved under the rug. I want to shout out the Public Theater. It's one of the incredible institutions like the Queens Museum, which is a permanent fixture in my district. But the Public Theater has really actually brought bilingual Shakespeare to Traverse Park like never before. I'm hoping to champion budget funding for them this year. And as your mayor, I really want to be able to make sure that this is part and continues to be a part of the cultural identity of our city.
Thank you. Scott Stringer.
So I'm going to answer this from a land use and zoning perspective, not a funding perspective. And I'm really glad that the plazas in your community have seen great success because they really can be the heart and soul of a community. But I will tell you that we community people have gotten played when it comes to public spaces and the plazas. I know this because I did the numbers, I did the investigation, and we made deals with developers and private sector, and we said for more density, for more bonus height, for everything, give us a plaza for our kids, for the seniors, and it was a deal negotiated by the community, by city council members. That's the way it was. State of play today, they're locked. State of play today, they're filthy. State of play today, no one goes to the plaza with their children in muddy parts of this city. The developers got what they wanted, but we didn't get what we needed for our communities. As mayor, because I know a little something about land use and zoning, as borough president for 8 years, took on some very powerful interests, as some of you may remember and know. But I will tell you right now, we got to rearrange the rules here. It's got to be open space first. It's got to be community-centered. And we also have to unlock what we have been locked out about for the last 20 years. And I've done the numbers on that.
Thank you. Whitney Tilson.
Yeah. I think our parks, museums, libraries, and art scene are the gems of New York. They are what make us unique. They're what keep people in the city despite so many other reasons people are leaving. And that's, by the way, a gargantuan problem. We've lost 8% of our population in the last 5 years. That's the second worst of the 70 largest cities in America, trailing only San Francisco, by the way. And it also is what draws 65 million tourists to New York, who are creating hundreds of thousands of jobs and spending over $100 billion here in the city. So as a business person looking at this, I'm like, we are underinvesting in this sector. We only spend, our Department of Cultural Affairs is only funded at $250 million in a $115 billion city budget. It's less than 1/4 of our budget. That's insane. It should be double that. Our parks that are the gems of this city, as Eleanor correctly pointed out, that makes such a big difference, get about $600 million of funding, about half of 1% of our budget. It should be double that as well, and it should be 1% of our budget going forward for our parks. It's not only the right thing to do in terms of quality of life and all, but actually you can just look at the numbers. And investment and improvement in parks improves the real estate value around it, and it pays for itself like 4 or 5 times over just in terms of the real estate taxes the city collects. So this is not only the smart and the right thing to do in terms of quality of life and keeping people in the city, but it literally pays for itself.
Okay, thank you. Assemblymember Mamdani.
You know, I think it is the job of city government to also show New Yorkers that art must be integrated with every aspect of our life. It cannot be considered as something purely separate. And I was really inspired by the move of a commissioner under the previous mayoral administration who set up public artists in residence at multiple city departments, inspired by the seminal residency we saw in the 70s at the sanitation department. And as I was looking more into that residency at the sanitation department, one of the projects there was that the artist shook the hand of every single sanitation worker and said, "Thank you." And there were a number of those workers who came forward to say that it healed something they didn't even know was broken inside them, that it showed them the worth of their work, the work that is typically unnoticed and yet work that we use as the foundation to build this entire city. And I think we need to show that art has that role, that we have to expand the way we see art, the way we engage with art. And I think we have to expand programs that we've seen in the past, such as when the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs worked with the Department of Cultural Affairs to ensure that ID NYC came with that museum access. Because art cannot be something that a New Yorker is priced out of. It must be something that every New Yorker understands as their right. And they have to experience and exercise that right at all of these cultural gems we have across New York City, because too often we only think of them in the context of tourism. We have to also think of them in the context of what it means for the people who call the city home.
Thank you. All right, our next question is Chelsea Pellat from the Whitney Museum.
Hi, my name is Chelsea Pellat. I started my career in the cultural sector as a CUNY intern at El Museo del Barrio, and now I work in development at the Whitney Museum. My question is, a task force of cultural workers and leaders in the disability community led the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs to create the Disability Forward Fund in 2018, and later the 5-year accessibility plan from 2024 to 2028. initiatives that aimed at increasing accessibility and inclusion for disabled artists, workers, audiences, and visitors in New York City's cultural sector. Despite these programs, the extensive labor of cultural access workers and the disability community has yielded minimal tangible impact. Without oversight and accountability, these plans remain largely symbolic rather than transformative. If elected, how would you move the city beyond performative planning toward real inclusion for disabled communities in the cultural sector?
All right, Michael Blake, we'll start with you.
First, I'll continue the work of what I did when I was in the Assembly for 6 years and find more ways that we create greater access in the physical spaces that we're talking about. When first and foremost, you think about it, many of the train stations in many of our neighborhoods don't have functioning elevators. And so when we think about that, how are we also tying it to our spaces when it comes to art? If we're not doing these things to make it easier for someone to engage, we're making it harder for you to actually be a part of the process. Second, we have to have substantially more funding that's going and thinking about how we partner up with the Office of Disabilities, as well as having an art and cultural director, because it's not just seeing it as a disability, but seeing the greatness of what you have and finding the ways that we can find more art that can be developed in that manner. We're seeing this in many manners. It's not just from someone that is physically trying to get someplace, but how do you use it from someone that may be blind, someone that has a learning disability, someone that cannot hear, all have to have greater access in that regard. We have to make sure that we're addressing and stopping the stigmas that are happening too often. And regularly, you are not getting the funding and support that you need because we are not looking at those with disabilities in the positive manner that you are and what you need. And so fundamentally, having someone that not only put funding towards this, but actually have a designated team towards this, working with our partners in the philanthropy. It's work that I did when I was in the White House and collaborating with Rebecca Coakley, and now what she's doing at the Ford Foundation, and recognizing that we have to do it all at the same time. Too often, we're actually not supporting those with disabilities to make sure you're part of the process. And you actually need someone that's going to be a mayor that's not only going to provide the funding, but actually have the personnel and the program that honors all three at the same time.
Thank you. All right, Comptroller Brad Lander.
Thank you. I hired the first disability justice liaison in the Comptroller's office. Had never been one before. We brought together a disability justice roundtable that assigned us some audits. One's forthcoming on express buses. We put out our 5-year plan for comment from a whole lot of organizations and got great feedback on it, improved it, and made it better. This year, we co-hosted, because that roundtable asked us, the Disability Pride Parade, so it could basically double in size and scale. And we brought summer interns in through a set of programs to make sure people with disabilities could be interns in the Comptroller's office. Here's what it added up to. A different young woman who wasn't through that program interned in that office with Nick Astor, who's our disability justice liaison. Her name's Mira. She's a college student, one of our college interns. We have a Diwali celebration in Richmond Hill a few weeks ago, when it was Diwali, a couple months ago. And Mira brings her college dance troupe to come dance in the Diwali celebration. And they might have given Zelnor a run for his money. I'm not, you know. Before she does the dance, she gets up and says to the uncles in the room, hey, you know, what I learned in the Comptroller's office is not only about how we watch the money and do the audits, it's that we got to think about disability justice as a lens for our community. And she does this teaching. She says, you know, we should think of Ganesh as a god, the elephant-headed god, as a god whose disability is his superpower. And then she does her dance, and everyone's so proud of, you know, that community. And it just shows, like, when you take this work seriously, when you have people lead, when you make sure people are in the room, you can transform how people think and what they believe in communities and integrate culture and access in a city that is fundamentally more inclusive.
Thank you. And Senator Zelnor Myrie.
Yeah, thank you. We got to put our money where our mouth is. There has to be capital investment to ensure that all of our cultural institutions are physically accessible. We have to ensure that the art is also accessible to people with disabilities. That means more tactile art. That means more ASL interpretation so that everyone can enjoy that experience. But it also means that the Mayor's Office of People with Disabilities should be working hand in hand with the Department of Cultural Affairs to ensure that disabled artists are getting the same opportunities, that they're getting the same access to opportunities and grants to be great. And so I think we have to be real about what these things are going to cost and then invest in them and not give excuses.
Thank you. Senator Jessica Ramos.
for the question. It's a real important one. I have to say that in thinking about physical accessibility, we of course have to think about audio and visual and other accessibilities, which really should feel like a full immersion in our city. I think for a long time we've had a habit of hiring disabled people as consultants so they can inform and guide roundtables and influence our initiatives, but we haven't always granted them lasting, permanent positions with actual decision-making power within our public and even private institutions. So I would rather just hire people who are experiencing those disabilities, who are the experts to be the leaders in these initiatives. I think what we need to do is make sure that we are even fighting for salary parity so that people with disabilities can also earn a living wage and be able to afford to live in our city. Costs and education have been major barriers for small nonprofit theaters, for example, to become fully inclusive spaces and to provide accessible spaces and programs for their patrons and artists. And the city can certainly play a role. It has a responsibility in making sure that we are not only helping those who are struggling to meet ADA laws, but also penalizing landlords who are failing to comply.
Thank you, Senator. Scott Stringer.
If we're going to get action in this area, we can't think minimally. When I was in the State Assembly, I actually chaired the task force on people with disabilities. It was a task force that had Disability Day, did the minimum, introduced 2 bills, and that was it. When I came back from session, I started to look at all the publicly owned buildings in the city and realized just how inaccessible they were. I was reminded about the words of the late, great David Dinkins, who said, we're all temporarily able-bodied. And what we did is we went building to building, city, state, federal, cultural, and we put out a blockbuster report that said it's time for everybody to ante up. Now, I tell you about that, but I also want to give you a little philosophy about what I'm going to do as mayor. When I was controller, I letter graded every single agency in this city based on their actual spend with women and minority-owned businesses. Yes, I failed agencies, Fs, Ds, and Cs. It drove the mayor crazy, but you know what? Every commissioner was coming to me saying, I'm trying, I'm trying. I letter graded the controller's office that I ran, and they told me, you don't have to do that, you're the auditor. And I said, no, let's bring it on. And I gave my office a C because this is hard work. And it's not just about funding. It's about the will and the capacity to get this done. So on day one, we're going to bring all the arts and cultural people into the office. Yes, we'll have a nice day and we'll talk about all the good things. But we are going to demand accountability because being able-bodied is not a choice. Being able-bodied is temporary. And we have to own up to the fact that we have to make sure everyone can work, everyone can enjoy the city, and the way we do this, government cracks down and never turns its back.
Thank you. Whitney Tilson.
I'm not familiar with the specific program that you described, but the story you tell is one I hear over and over again. The politicians promise so much, and they definitely deliver on the spending, but the end results are minimal and disappointing. It is particularly acute under an incompetent and corrupt mayor of the last 3 years, who's surrounded himself with incompetent and corrupt people. 26 of Mayor Adams' appointees are under investigation, indictment, or have resigned in disgrace. We are on our 4th police commissioner. Is it any wonder that every major crime, except for murders, thankfully, is up an average of 25% under just the last 3 years? He is lying to you about what's going on with crime in this city. So specifically to your program, it sounds, my guess would be the funding would come under the Department of Cultural Affairs, which, as I mentioned earlier, we should double funding for. Particularly, I would guess under the Community Development Fund, it's about a quarter, $60-odd million of that budget. It funds BRIC, for example. When I deliver on my commitment to double the funding, I think your program will also be fully funded if that's part of the problem. And I will also, as mayor, it's a strong mayoral system we have here. The mayor appoints the top 155 people in the administration. Unlike this mayor, I will be appointing super competent, non-corrupt people who will run things a lot better, just manage this system a lot better, and I think that will flow down through to virtually everything the city does, including your program.
Thank you. Assemblymember Mamdani?
You know, I think one of the key issues in the program that you cited is that it was a pilot and that the pilot funding finished. And it is so frustrating when we see an example of the better world that we deserve and we see it borne out in the results that we had long hoped for, and then we do not have the political will to expand that and scale it up. And I've seen that myself in a fight for making buses free, which is another aspect of disability justice, because this is the only form of public transit that is universally accessible. And that's why a central part of my platform is to take the successes we saw in another pilot for free buses, where ridership went up by 30%, assaults on bus drivers dropped by 38.9%, and we saw a majority of new riders making less than $28,000, and expand it to every single bus across New York City, finally giving New Yorkers a way to get around that is not the slowest buses in the nation. Now, to the specific program that you're talking about, I think also we have a mayor who a few years ago wanted to tout increased funding for arts. And what he also did in that moment is he brought together funding that was specifically for artists who are disabled and lumped it into a larger pot. And we know that if we do not separate this out as a line item, then we will ensure that those artists are going to be ignored. And I commit to finally treating those artists as a singular commitment as part of our funding and ensuring that those artists get the funding they need to get back to work.
Thank you. Okay. Now, I will say we are running a little short on time, and this is live. So the next question is from Toya Lillard from 651 Arts.
Thank you. My name is Toya Lillard. I'm Executive Director of 651 Arts, a 37-year-old legacy arts organization born right here in Brooklyn, New York. My question is the following. The recent census reports that our city is 64% people of color, and there are currently an unprecedented number of Black and brown leaders in the cultural sector. Even with the creation of equity offices, well-funded studies, and well-meaning initiatives, cultural funding neither reflects nor supports this data or the current leadership. And historically disinvested communities continue to get less than their share of support. What policies and pipelines can be implemented to foster palpable cultural equity across New York City, ensuring that all New Yorkers have access to cultural representation in every neighborhood and every borough? Thank you.
Thank you. We are going to have 60 seconds each for these last two questions. Michael Blake, we'll start with you.
First, Toya, I need your shawl because it's BRIC here in BRIC right now, right? You know, we need to provide grants to cultural institutions and not have you just rely on reimbursements that are happening over and over again. If we do that, we allow you to be able to realize the dream across the city over and over again. We are asking all of you in the arts space to do incredible things, but we're not funding you, giving the support that you need in a very practical and real way. Separately, we have to make art a part of all that we're doing across the board. Equity is changing the game across our city, and when you think about how too often you have folks that are telling us that equity is not good for us, we embrace who we are. We are New York because of our equity, because of our diversity, and because of our arts and our culture. And so if we expand it out by ensuring not only that we have it in all that we do, from the businesses to the nonprofits to the education sector, then we actually allow for more people to have a part of the process here. But I fundamentally think we need to actually fund you and support all of you in a very real and consistent way. It is not fair that we're regularly asking for those of you in the arts to transform the game when it comes to equity, but we're asking you and paying you back down the line. It is unfair, it is not acceptable, and it's not what I would do when I'm your mayor.
Okay, thank you. Brad Lander.
Let me tell you what I've done with the biggest resource I've had to manage. The biggest resource in the Comptroller's office is the city's pension funds. Prior to my time in office, there had never been a clear report put out, much less annually, about how much of that is managed by Black, Latino, women, Asian managers. So I started putting out an annual report every year. In my time, we've grown it by 36%, $6 billion more being managed by Black, Latino, Asian, and women managers, from $17 billion up to $23 billion. And those folks have managed better. Some of the best managers in our portfolio outperformed their benchmarks by 5%, contributed last year to saving taxpayers $1.8 billion. And that's like disclosing every year what you do, getting your people aligned toward equity. This week, for the first time, we're bringing together 12 public pension funds from across 6 states to give MWBE and emerging managers an opportunity to meet pension fund investors. And that's what I'll do as mayor, like clear annual reports, clear instructions to commissioners, and you'll see the results.
Okay, Senator Marie.
Thank you. Thank you, Brandon. I didn't want to interrupt the applause. Okay, we're just trying to keep it moving. Okay, Okay, so I represent a very beautiful district, a diverse district with a lot of amazing cultural institutions. I got the Weeksville Heritage Center, I got the Brooklyn Museum, I got the library, I got the park, I got the garden. But I'm also from Flatbush, and I grew up going to Carnival and doing my thing on the West Indian Day Carnival Parade. Those institutions, we got Tropical Fete in the room right now, don't get that proactive support on how to access funding. My mom had a jewelry shop on Flatbush Avenue. She had to close down because she didn't know the process of how to get credit, of how to get help to be sustainable. I want to proactively reach out to our cultural institutions, particularly those that are led by people of color, because it's important. Sometimes we just don't have the access, and it's important for us to be proactive in providing that access.
Okay, Senator Jessica Ramos.
Well, thank you for the question. As mayor, I would have control over so many public spaces and institutions, and we would also have a lot of control over the budget. And this is really important in knowing how to dispatch our taxpayer dollars in order to support all of these different spaces, whether they're libraries, parks, open streets, schools, clubhouses, public housing, NYCHA even. We want to make sure that there are that every venue is a perfect venue for artistic development, for arts programming, for arts education. You know, our public libraries are where many people are exposed to the arts for the very first time. And we have a mayor who has repeatedly cut these resources. We need to make sure that government is meeting people where they are and being able to support the beautiful art that they create. I hail from the most diverse district in the entire country. We speak 200 languages in Jackson Heights, and I want to make sure that every single type of New Yorker has access to being able to create the art that we can all enjoy.
Thank you. Scott Stringer.
You know, I talked to you a little bit about how we letter graded agencies based on spend with women and minority-owned businesses. I want to take that model and overlay it with the fact that I was the first elected official ever to hire a chief diversity officer as controller and made de Blasio have a diversity officer in almost every agency. And you know what? It worked because when you have people who understand diversity, you actually get a better result. But what I want to do in this space is 2 things. One, we have to start analyzing and making sure that we are comstatting, for lack of a better word, where the funding is going. And that doesn't have to always be from the controller's office. The mayor's office should take the lead in terms of funding allocation. And second, we have got to create a pipeline with kids of color so that they can go become part of museums and cultural institutions. The big institutions, a lot of these hires are legacy hires. Their parents are on boards. They make a lot of money. I know how difficult it was for Elise to break in, starting in Washington, D.C. She dreamed of being in the arts. And it wasn't an easy journey for a woman, and it's still not an easy journey. So I want to be able to be proactive in measuring those results.
We're trying to make sure everybody gets
yes, ma'am. Sorry.
Yeah, I grew up in a very diverse world. My parents met and married in the Peace Corps. I spent my childhood in Tanzania and Nicaragua. And the first school I ever went to was in Tanzania. I was the only white kid in a school of Tanzanian farmers' children. And so I think our diversity in New York is one of our absolute greatest strengths. It's one of the reasons I love the city so much, and my administration will reflect the incredible diversity across New York. Specifically as it relates to the arts, 4 of our major museums, Guggenheim, MoMA, the Met, and the Museum of Natural History, 96 to 99% of their collections are not on display. They're in storage somewhere. And all of those museums are located in one tiny part of New York. I think I'm going to have those museums unlock their storage and the gems that they have that aren't on display. Let's bring them out and do pop-up exhibitions and fill the museums all around this city.
Thank you. Assemblymember Mamdani.
No, Whitney's talking about Tanzania, so I think I have to talk about Uganda. I am only alive because my mother made a film called Mississippi Masala and met my father in the process of it. And at the time, she was looking for funding for that film, and she told the story. It was about a love story between an African-American man and an Indian-Ugandan woman. And she went up to a financier, and he said, where are the white actors in this story? And she said, don't worry, they'll be the waiters. And she taught me that if we don't tell our own stories, no one else will. And too often when it comes to stories about people of color, by people of color, we don't have that funding in New York City and across the world. And what I'm committed to doing as the mayor is to understanding art beyond simply tourism, beyond simply the fiscal impacts, because so much of the beauty and the value of art is found in neighborhoods far from Museum Mile. And what we need is an administration that looks at those community-based organizations that are providing art to their neighbors as being equally valuable than the same ones that we visit on Sundays.
Thank you. Okay, we have one last question, but we're only going to have 30 seconds for this last question. Like I said, I know everybody's very passionate about their answer, so I apologize. But we have Barika Williams, Executive Director for ANHD.
Hi. Hello. I'm batting cleanup. So my name is Barika Williams. I'm the Executive Director of ANHD. Something you all may not have known about me. I'm also the child of a family-owned creative business, small business. So this is near and dear to my heart. So through collaborations with community and cultural organizations, with business improvement districts, with bids, we've recently expanded our investment into public arts installations, creative lighting, community festivals, cultural festivals, really pursuing and advancing place-based artistic strategies that are specifically designed to support local economies while they are advancing and amplifying neighborhood character, history, and identity, right? So what are your ideas for efforts and creative approaches that you might take to bolster neighborhood economic development, we're thinking about in our communities, that really understands the intersection of arts and culture as a part of our neighborhood economies?
Okay, this is the speed dating round, so everybody gets 30 seconds to answer. Michael Blake.
We need to expand and have more bids, because if we do that, you can actually support the work that's happening in arts and culture locally. We need a prompt pay system so you're actually paid faster, so that you're not waiting for the delays that are consistently happening in our community. You have to have a greater and comprehensive vision around what happens with education so that we demonstrate that art is also economic impact and also is transforming what's happening. And simultaneously, if we want to address the mental health dynamics that are happening in our community as well, you can bring in to actually lead to healing directly by having a 988 system so that everyone can see how art is impactful for good on the ground.
Okay, Comptroller Brad Lander.
Before I was in elected office, I spent 15 years in affordable housing and community development, including as chair of Association Neighborhood Housing and Development. And maybe the favorite thing I worked on in that time when I was at the Pratt Center was working with the communities around the Bronx River. So this is the Point, Youth Ministries for Peace and Justice, Nos Quedamos. And they led this effort to tear down a piece of the Sheridan Expressway, open up the Bronx River, turn Starlight Park into this place that everyone was excited to come to. And the whole neighborhood changed as a result. Economic development comes from the ground up. It creates housing and economic value, but it's grounded in culture and community.
Thank you. Senator Myrie?
Okay, so I want to add 50,000 more summer youth employment jobs, and I want to be led by the youth and have part of this employment be focused on exactly what we're talking about here. Let the young people lead, unleash their creativity, and they will keep us safe.
Okay, Senator Ramos.
I think we need more cultural landmarks in our city, and actually identify neighborhoods that can be supportive, landmark centered around the arts, to make sure that we are fully funding all of our institutions so that they don't have to rely on bids that are funded by property tax assessments, meaning the landlords. And I want to caution against the corporatization of art. I want to make sure that we're protecting the artists and their ability to express.
Thank you, Senator Ramos. Scott Stringer, thank you.
I would approach this work through the lens of the community. You know, when I was borough president, I did something called community board reform. What was that? That was about diversifying our community boards, making sure the powerful interests listen to them. I put urban planners on every community board. I know how to do this. If we're going to be successful, it's not just about funding, it's about listening, and it's time that we listen to communities to make the key decisions. Every community is different culturally, right? And we all have to listen to voices that are not heard.
All right, Whitney Tilson.
Yeah, I fully agree with the premise of the question, and as part of doubling funding for the arts and parks and museums generally, I would want to fund that as well.
All right, and Assemblymember Mamdani.
My favorite museum in New York City is the New York City subway. I love MTA Art and Design. I live for mass transit scope. I love all of these different pieces I've grown up with across the city. And I think we need public art everywhere, whether it's with bids or whether it's through that art and design program. I also think that art can have uses beyond just that of enjoying the beauty of it. We've seen studies that art can be used as a traffic calming measure, where across 17 sites, art was found to be linked to a 50% decrease in pedestrian deaths and car crashes. We can be doing that across our city.
Thank you. Okay, well, we are coming to the end of the program. If anybody has a last 10-second remark that they want to say, please speak now. I believe people should not be penalized.
I want to say that I'm sorry that I'm not there live to show you how I can salsa. I salsa. So I feel like I'll have to deliver on that the next time I see everybody.
Okay, thank you. Anybody, last remarks? Please, Michael Blake.
Go, you go.
You got a few seconds. 10 seconds.
Happy Black History Month, first of all, right? Okay. You want to see more about our vision around guaranteed income, around Mitchell-Lama 2.0, about helping our communities, go to blakefornyc.com. Let's actually have a mayor that's going to help you and not a mayor that's corrupt like Eric Adams. Let's go.
All right, Comptroller Brad Lander.
Thank you for organizing this panel. Arts and culture are the heart of this city. We don't remember it enough, and so I appreciate BRIC and everybody who organized this panel. Let's hear it for them. What you want is a mayor with a track record to deliver on all the things we're talking about. I got that track record, and I will continue to stand with you guys every step of
All
the way.
right, Senator Zellner Myrie.
Thank you. Thank you to BRIC, and I want to use the remainder of my 10 seconds to thank our moderator for doing a great job. Thank you.
If anything, we all know everyone's name now. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you and everyone's name. Okay. Scott Stringer.
Thank you for all being here. This is a very powerful debate tonight. I will tell you that there's not a candidate up here who doesn't want to run out and check their Twitter on the Eric Adams investigation. So if I don't stick around, you know what I got to do. Thank you all very much.
Yeah.
Okay, and Whitney Tilson.
I'll echo those thanks. Thank you all. And if you are looking for change in this city, please check out WhitneyForMayor.com.
Okay. And Assemblymember Mamdani, last words.
Thank you all so much for being here. It's been a pleasure. If you are interested in a more affordable city, one that we can get past affording our rent, our childcare, our MetroCard, and back to affording to dream, I would ask you to check out Zohran for NYC.com. Thank you so much.
Okay. Well, I do want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. We all know that it's so important for us to be involved, to come out to things like this, to hear from our future leaders, whoever it might be, and for us to also make our decisions based on what we hear firsthand. So thank you all for coming out. Make sure you mix and mingle, ask the questions, you know, just follow all of them and see what it is that they're saying. Was anybody missing from the panel today? Who's running? Okay. All right, well, thank you so much, and God bless you all.
Thank you.
Good to see you.